It is unfortunate. I'm just to add to that a little bit is our society now is based upon quick, fast,
Mm.
right? So I'm using this as half joking, right? Oh, I read a book on generational trauma. I know everything about it. I'm fixed, right?
Yeah.
No, right? I mean, it's like when you commit to doing the work, and yes, that includes therapy. You can't do the work on your own. You can't. You can't. When you commit to doing the work, it has to be a lifetime endeavor.
Hmm.
And if it isn't, and if you're not going to commit to that, don't do it. Live blissfully in ignorance, happy, and that's fine. You used the word tradition before. Some traditions are great, right?
Hmm.
I'm a huge fan of some traditions. Some of them belong in the ash heap of history. They just don't work for anybody.
Three. Hi there, Uncle Joey.
Hello.
Thanks for joining Cafecito Corner here on Cuéntame.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. So, we have a couple of topics for today's chat, I believe.
Great.
You and I have been talking for a couple of weeks now about so many topics that I really wanted to cover on here.
Sure.
And I've been really excited to pick your brain on camera and share it with the public because I think you have a lot of things to share.
Mm.
So, one of the questions that was on my mind was about your relationship with generational trauma, something that we've
Mhm.
talked about. Um, so, could you give us a short backstory of your thoughts on that?
Sure. So I think what's important is to understand exactly what generational trauma is, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's relative to the person, right? So for me, generational trauma was things that were handed down unconsciously from my great grandparents to my grandparents to my mother to my father. And then as a young child, were handed down or handed over to me.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't necessarily mean that it was abusive. It doesn't necessarily mean that it was causing some kind of mental disorder. Um, when you look at it from my perspective now, you have to look at it with a bunch of empathy and compassion because people just didn't know better,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they taught you what they knew. And when you look at some of the experiences that they've had in their life, it makes sense that they raised us and handed down to us certain things that just didn't apply, and it could be considered trauma. But it was just them surviving, just being in survival mode.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. So, when do you think that it actually was on your radar, this whole concept of, you know, them passing this thing down to you?
That's a really great question, right? Because you and I have talked about this before, right? We're both gifted in our own individual ways, and as a young child, you you can tell when something's off, and you can tell that something isn't really working as a child. So what happens is you enter into survival mode and you adjust and adapt. So for me, when it became evident what got handed off to me, there were two incidents in my life. First was the death of my parents. Left me feeling like an orphan, right? And even though they would not really offer a lot of advice, they just weren't there anymore. So now you're really experiencing the things that you were taught as you were young and as you were growing up, and now you have nobody to reflect with,
Mm-hmm.
right? The second time it became more of a impact, a real traumatizing event was
Mm-hmm.
about 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
went through a breakup, hit basically hit bottom, and decided, okay, enough is enough. Um, Not every single person in my life is crazy or is mentally diverse, shall we say?
Sure.
The only common thing through all of it was me. So I needed to knuckle up and start doing what they call the work, um, working with a therapist, digging deep, understanding my own behaviors, and that's when I started understanding, holy crap, if I look back at my mom, I look back at my dad, and then I look back at my grandparents and my cousins and my sisters, there's a blueprint there. And it gave me a place to start. Uh, and it gave me something to look at, but it wasn't personalized. So I
Mm-hmm.
had to adjust it to fit to me.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the difficult things for me was my siblings are 100% Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
I'm half Italian and half Puerto Rican.
Mm-hmm.
My trauma experiences are completely different than theirs,
That's where you and I, yeah.
right?
Yes.
So, unless you start really wanting to understand what's going on inside your brain, and I mean this literally inside your brain, because when you're in survival mode as a young child, you form this cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is you stay in that survival mode. You stay as that 15-year-old or that 10-year-old that needed to survive and adapt and adjust to even things that were unhealthy. Now you find yourself as a 50-year-old man or as a 50-year-old woman, and you're still approaching things as that traumatized 10-year-old.
Yep.
And unless you can unhook that link and start retraining your brain, you're just destined to continue exactly what's been carrying on for one or two or three generations.
Oh yeah.
So for me, the work started with a fantastic book called No More Mr. Nice Guy,
Mm-hmm.
um, written by a PhD, and his name is escaping me right now, but I'll remember it. And it's not what you think that guys need to be tough and we can't cry and we need to muscle up and forget about things, and it's not about that at all.
Mm-hmm.
um the author is a admitted recovering nice guy, and
Mm-hmm.
for purposes of this discussion, let's just say a nice guy is a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Okay, people pleasing is a survival mechanism, right? This is something that you learn very young. And unless you were taught boundaries, healthy habits, you morph this and grow it, and it becomes a life of its own and becomes that cognitive dissonance that I was talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about, in a very simple way, um, how to break these patterns. And more importantly, how to understand them. Where did this come from? When you're a child, it's not because you fell and skinned your knee and it's caused trauma, right? You're a child, your brain is forming. You're surrounded by people that your survival is dependent on them. And they can only teach you what they know.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're a parent that survived the Depression, that survived World War One, World War Two, the Korean War, Vietnam, uh, Nixon's presidencies,
Mm-hmm.
um, And you're also someone who that English wasn't your first language, wasn't your native language. My mother's native language is Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
So if you've experienced those life traumas, it forms how you're going to approach life in general, right? My mother was always stashing pennies away, stashing nickels away, right? That's just learned behavior from the Depression, right? Um, my dad, he had a very tumultuous, shall we say, relationship with his father.
Mm-hmm.
So my father had two modes, right? Quiet and the storm, right? And when he was quiet, you were always worrying about the storm.
Yeah.
So, but you know as well as I do that he had this incredible ability to always make you feel safe. And this is where your cognitive dissonance forms. Here is a man who makes me feel safe, but I'm terrified of him. And that's something that he experienced with his dad. And my mother experienced in her first marriage and her relationship with her dad and her sisters. So they just carried over what they knew. And it just becomes a survival mechanism. You end up people pleasing, no boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and unfortunately, like I said earlier, when I started becoming healthier, they're gone. There's no one to ask why. What, so you have to figure this out. And that is the most difficult thing to do when you're like you and we have, ADHD, we have, we run things in our brain consistently, um, and convincing facts sometimes aren't enough. Yeah, as somebody who is pursuing genealogy, being a genealogy expert, okay, I've got this piece of paper, but that's not enough. There's got to be something else.
Yeah.
It's the same way with mental health and generational trauma. It's not just the depression. It's not just the Vietnam War,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not just the gas shortage. It's something else. It's something they were taught, and they were never able to pull themselves out of it.
Something that they were taught in the sense that it wasn't just the outside of the home environment, it was also inside the home environment.
Yes, because you can't, you, well, let me put it this way. My mother grew up in Spanish Harlem, right? And um, walking the streets, um, walking the streets was always dangerous, right? So you develop this awareness of what's around you. And just being a young woman riding the New York City subway trains, you have an awareness with you. When you come home, you would think it's a safe place where you can let your
Mm-hmm.
guard down and you can be who you are. But they couldn't, right? Um, and this is where the generational trauma comes in because her parents were just teaching her what they knew.
Mm-hmm.
And as a as one of four daughters, there was competition for daddy's love.
Mm-hmm.
So the in-home environment, um, I'm not going to say was unhealthy, but was naturally competitive, right? So everybody wanted daddy's love. My grandfather was a very proper man, worked, provided for his family. I would call him a role model, but he's a victim of his times. And he taught his daughters what he could. And my grandmother taught them what she could.
And in addition to that, your grandparents were passing down uh, idealized behaviors that were kind of out of sync with the times, right? Because
Absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
they're coming from super rural Puerto Rico, moving to Spanish Harlem, and it's like hyper industrialized in comparison.
Absolutely.
And the competition's not just at home, right? Like the competition's also like being in Manhattan and the hustle. Like there's like a whole other level of hustle culture coming from the islands to New York City, I
Absolutely.
think. Yeah.
It's worlds apart.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I can tell you um, when we lived in the South Bronx,
Mm-hmm.
I can remember sitting on my brother's shoulders, watching the two apartment buildings burning down, but burning down around the building where we lived. That was the era of the Bronx's burning.
Mm.
And my father made the decision, we're getting the hell out of here,
Yeah.
right? So imagine as a 4 year old sitting on your brother's shoulders and watching two buildings burning down around you.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, it's a freak out.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't process it as a child, right? All you think of, I'm safe on my brother's shoulders,
Mm-hmm.
right? But your environment, to what you say, is completely out of kilter with that feeling of safety,
Mm-hmm.
right? So yeah, it's generational trauma is there's a lot of clickbait on
Mm-hmm.
IG, and other forums. But the one thing I think is important, it's relative to the person. No one
Mm-hmm.
is the same.
Oh yeah. Even within our family, no one's the same. I
Oh
agree with
boy.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're talking
One
about
thing
it.
I find curious though is that initially you said you first became of like your origin story with generational trauma was this awareness that certain things didn't come from your environment; they came from specifically the way that each generation was raised. And then we went on to talk about um, your initial foray with therapy outside
Hmm.
of grief therapy. Do you think really that you or anybody else in our specifically in our family that they would have had or that like you would have had this kind of awareness about generational trauma had it not been for that like microscope that is therapy?
That's a really great question. Um, and it's a bit of a confusing question for me
Sorry.
because no, it's okay. It's because that this helps me as well. You know as well as I do, my mother, your grandmother,
Mm-hmm.
kept dictionaries all over the house. She
Mm-hmm.
had a full set of encyclopedias,
Mm-hmm.
and you were raised the same way as I was. If you had a
Yeah.
question, look it up, right? So here you are asking me if I had enough awareness to ask them about therapy. um, I did not. I did not feel as though I could be vulnerable in my home that way.
Oh, so my question is actually more so if it hadn't been for therapy,
Oh,
do you think that generational trauma would have been as salient a concept to you? Like do you think you would have had this level of awareness that you have
absolutely
talking to
not.
a therapist? Yeah, that's what I was
Absolutely not.
wondering.
Absolutely not.
Um,
So much of it is
okay.
behavioral.
Mm,
Um, and and adding on to that, it's instinctual because generational trauma is about survivability. And when these things are handed down to you, it's because the previous generation were taught things to survive. Your generation is taught things to survive that are based on the previous generation, which just doesn't mix. Um, and then you add into the complications of cultures.
Mm-hmm.
My mom was Puerto Rican, my dad was Italian.
Mm-hmm.
Two different, both Latin, passionate, loving people,
Mm-hmm.
but different, different experiences.
Mm-hmm. Mm. Oh yeah. Do you see those two population groups progressing away from generational trauma, like at some point?
That's, another great one. So let's take out the stereotypes,
Mm.
right? So let's get rid of that. Um, I would say that the information around what generational trauma is
Mm-hmm.
and how it affects people
Mm-hmm.
is out in the open. However, I have seen traditional Italian families still carrying the same things that my grandmother, my grandfather, oh, we don't talk about that
Yeah.
type of thing,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? So I guess what I'm saying is if they want to learn about it, it's there. If they don't and they want to continue without understanding why,
Mm-hmm.
then they're just going to pass it on to their kids and it just continues.
Yeah. I have a feeling it's also like a bell curve of population where you're going to have the two extremes that you're going to have the one extreme that is like extremely traditional,
Hmm.
still passing down extremely bad habits that are not keeping up with the times. And then you're going to have the other extreme that is perhaps more aware, like you and I. And then the vast majority in the middle, they've got to be in that algorithm. If you're not on the therapy algorithm, there's very like there's only a small chance, right, that you're actually going to be aware of like what does a healthy relationship with your family look like, what does a
Ab-
healthy relationship period look like. um,
That's
there's
absolutely right.
definitely right, like there's definitely like a series of videos that if you're not tuned into that algorithm you just don't see it. And that's really unfortunate, I think.
It is unfortunate. I'm just to add to that a little bit is our society now is based upon quick, fast,
Mm.
right? So I'm using this as half joking, right? Oh, I read a book on generational trauma. I know everything about it. I'm fixed, right?
Yeah.
No, right? I mean, it's like when you commit to doing the work, and yes, that includes therapy. You can't do the work on your own. You can't. You can't. When you commit to doing the work, it has to be a lifetime endeavor.
Mm-hmm.
And if it isn't, and if you're not going to commit to that, don't do it. Live blissfully in ignorance, happy, and that's fine. You used the word tradition before. Some traditions are great, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm a huge fan of some traditions. Some of them belong in the ash heap of history. They just don't work for anybody.
Well, that's our
Um,
opinion, but
yeah,
some people would disagree and think.
it depends on the tradition,
Yeah.
right? So,
Yeah.
but when it comes to generational stuff, um, I think the biggest thing that we have to learn, especially as Latin peoples,
Mm-hmm.
um, is to adapt, right? Not fit in, belong, right? And to do that, got to fix your stuff.
Well, that's today's topic, isn't it? Belonging versus fitting in.
Hmm.
So thank you for bringing that up.
Oh, you're very
So
welcome.
speaking of belonging versus fitting in, Please enlighten my audience on the origins of you not feeling like you belonged or fitting in.
Huh. We're gonna need
Yeah.
more than 20 minutes.
Okay,
Um,
that's fair.
so a little bit of enlightenment, right? So, um, belonging and fitting in. Well, first, let me start with, how I learned about that? I didn't learn about that till I was 51. And it
Not
was
surprised.
Brené Brown who did I think it was a TED Talk or it was one of her presentations. And she talked about the differences about belonging and fitting in.
I'll link it. I'll link it below.
And I learned and she's incredible. She's a researcher by profession.
Mm-hmm.
But she is, talks like a sailor, but she's got the goods. She knows what she's talking about. For me, um, this is a little bit personal, but for me, fitting in became a way of life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I was bullied. I was small for my age. Um, I was intelligent, and when you got a father that's a truck driver and you got a mother that's a housewife, there's not much room for feeling like you belong. You got to fit in.
Mm.
So for me, it was I got to fit in so I don't get beat up. I got to fit in so they don't take my lunch money. All right. Then as I got older, right, I had to fit in to be accepted, validation. And after a while, you compromise your values or you lose your values or your
Mm-hmm.
integrity. And for me, when I got knee deep into therapy, you realize that you've lived a life of fitting in.
Mm-hmm.
And when you finally find yourself belonging, uh, your whole perception of everything changes. It just changes. It really does.
Where was it that you felt like you finally belonged?
Huh.
I want to know though.
Okay, no, it's a fair question, and I'm going to embarrass you.
Okay, great.
Is when I reached out to you. Is when I got up the courage to ask our aunt for your phone number,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and I reached out to you. That was my first step in becoming a person belonging, reaching out to family I haven't talked to. So that was my first step. Yeah.
Oh wow. Oh wow. Yeah. My face is all beet red now.
It's not red. Stop. It's okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah, it, it how do I say this? When you finally belong, when you finally feel like you belong,
Mm.
you rediscover your code of ethics, your integrity, your character.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned grief earlier in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
When you lose both your parents, uh, there's a feeling of being naked out in the world,
Mm-hmm.
right? And fitting in becomes your only way to be emotionally clothed. Once you deal with that grief, you manage it, you process it. It never goes away, but you manage it and you process it. You start to feel as though I can do this. I can learn better. Um, and that's how it worked for me. Um, I had to crash uh, 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago. And that's the one thing, it's a good point because that's the one thing with generational trauma that people shouldn't fear when they're trying to break it. You have to suffer a death
Mm.
individually,
Mhm.
right? You have to suffer a death and then reemerge, right?
Go through the hero's journey.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
If you don't let go, um, if you don't let go, you're living a Sisyphusian life. You're constantly pushing that rock up the hill, and you don't have to. You have a
Mm.
choice,
Mm.
right? And of course, the legend of Sisyphus, he got cursed because he cheated death twice. So if you don't accept the fact of part of you has to die in order to live, you're just gonna push that rock way up that hill, boy.
That's a lot to chew on though.
It is, but how do I say this? Um, yeah, it is. It's a lot. It's a
It
lot.
is. Yeah.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
But you have to think yourself worthy of it,
Hmm.
right? And that's another whole other story.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time to talk
That's
about
fine.
worthy versus
That's fine.
unworthy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
fine. Yeah.